Welcome to Aaron Plays. This will be episode 1 of a playthrough of a game called Guiscard 2 by Historic 1 Edition Games. This is the sort of grandson of the old standard games Cry Havoc. Guiscard 2 is set in Italy and Sicily during the 11th century, and it's a skirmish war game in the same vein of man-to-man combat during that time, using Normans, Byzantines, Germans, Italians, and various others, mercenaries. I think some Arabs in there, and so on. In these episodes, I'd like to play the first scenario, which is called The Evening of Civitate, and use that as a rules explanation and learning playthrough. And the first 4 scenarios in the book can be played with only part of the rules. I'm looking at the rules at the present moment. And I think it can be played, the first 4 can be played with the first 11 pages of the rules. So I'll be focusing on those 11 pages with this scenario. And then maybe if none of you guys like watching this, I will do the next section of the rules with the next scenario that comes along in that. So the situation currently in this scenario is it's July 1053. There's been a battle under the walls of Civitate, and it's coming to an end. A small group of Swabian knights become separated from the main force and resist the onslaught of the Normans. Off in the distance, a few fellow minstrels realize a desperate fight and rally a few fleeing militia and Lombard knights to rescue them. Can they reach them in time? Okay, so let me just shrink me down a little bit. I'll move you to the side. There we go. And you can see what's going on here. Not shrink me so small. There we go. All right, so these here are the Swabian knights that are trapped on this hillock. These here are the Normans, are highlighted in red. And these are the rescue party over here. As you can see, I highlighted these in blue, red, and yellow. Now, this map actually comes with, this is an overlay that's been placed over a tower that's under here. So there are overlays on the map. The map does extend, it's actually 2 map sheets, but the setup for these guys, it says anywhere on the sheet, so I moved them as close as possible to the Normans. It says for the setup of these guys, they've got to set up on this hill, and they set up first. Then the Normans set up, and then these guys set up. The game is played for 12 rounds, turns, and it's decided, the victor is decided by how many of these guys are surviving at the end. If there's 4 or more, it is a German victory. These guys and these guys are representing Germans. If it's 2 to 3, it's a draw, and 1 or more, 1 or none, and it's a Norman victory. So those are the victory conditions. Now let's have a little breakdown of rules and a little bit of focus on those. Okay, I'm going to zoom in. Okay, let's have a look at these guys on the hill. Okay, so that's maximum zoom in. A bit about scale. Each of these hexagons represents about 2 meters. And each turn represents a few tens of seconds, less than a minute. Enough time to get a couple of shots off with a bow, etc. Now, these guys here, let's say these are the Swabians. And as you can see there's various numbers, and each one is individually named. Okay, so going through the individual numbers on each counter, the black one here is its attack value. The red one is its armor value, defense value. And the blue one at the bottom is its movement value. If this number here is circled, it shows that they're armored. So if you look at these guys here, they're not armored. Their number is, they've still got a shield, but their armor is light. It might be like cloth or maybe a very limited amount of leather. Well, these guys here are, they've got chainmail on them. Okay. At the bottom of each counter is a code. Okay, so you can see, right? Yeah, that's got SIL, GIK. Now, the first letter refers to whom they are. The G stands for Germans, N stands for Normans, S stands for Slavians. Then you've got the type, which is the second letter. So I is for infantry, and C is for cavalry. So you've got Norman, cavalry, and the K is the class. The K is for knight. So NCK, Norman, cavalry, knight. These guys, German infantry knights, and these guys, Silesian infantry light. All right. Also, mounted take up 2 hexes. Whilst foot take up a single hex. Mounted to show the front of the actual horse, or which way it's pointing, is these little arrows here. That is the front of the guy. Now, each of these counters has 4 stages that they can go through. So these are them at their full strength, and I'm going to, you can see there's quite a lot of options when I right-click using the Vassal module. Obviously, if I was playing it real, I would have these options. I have to change the counter physically. So if I decrease this guy, that's him stunned. Okay, so you've got on the physical counter, on the front of the physical counter, is full strength. If he takes a stun result, you flip the counter over. Obviously on the Vassal, you just click it. Then if he gets worse than a stun, that's him wounded. His values are dropped. If you look carefully at the picture, it's got an arrow stuck in it. He actually does look a little bit tattier. And then his final stage is him dead. The dead counters do remain on the map. And if there's enough dead counters in the same hex, they can actually become a terrain hindrance. Okay, and there we go, back at full strength. So each of these guys can go through 4 stages. The cavalry technically have 8, no, it'd be 6, because they can be mounted or dismounted. If they are mounted, and he goes to decrease, the horse is, the man is unmounted from the horse, and you'd actually put the figure guy, the foot guy, next to him. Decrease again. Okay. There's also a dead horse counter for each of these guys. And if I want to just mount him, I'd have to actually dig out the counter for him. Okay, so that's the counters gone through. The slight downside of the physical game is each of these counters is a white background. So you must come up with some method to remind you who's on each guy. Obviously, you can still see the codes, but you can see that's quite small. And if you're looking at this on a real map from a distance, it's just white counters. I'd like them to have done some form of shading on the counters, but throughout the system, they've consistently stayed with white counters. I think that's to represent that it could design a scenario having anybody or faction on your particular side, especially if you've got mercenary bands and so on. So I can understand it. And I actually use physically very small plastic counters or round counters. For you Brits out there, you probably know them as tiddlywinks, and they really are small. And I put them next to the counters to remind me of who's in one faction and who's in the other. The vassal module has the advantage that you can actually put a color highlight around the counters. This infantry here, this J equals 4, these are javelin armed, and that's how many javelins they currently have, ammo-wise. There's a little 0, 1 there. I think, because I thought it was a counter that can actually go up to 4 and such forth, but it's not. It shows if they're armed or unarmed with javelins. So they're all still currently armed with javelins. If I zoom out a little bit, so you can actually see the whole map, okay, that we're playing with again. So these are mounted knights, they're German, okay. So what the M stands for, right, is medium. So they're not as heavily armed as these guys, okay. So the combat values aren't, see, that's a Lombard knight, LCK. And these are German medium cavalry, GCM. So they still look as heavily armored as these Norman knights. Okay. So that's the counters that we're currently able to see on here. Terrain. All right. On here we have mainly open ground. On here, there is some slopes here. So where the darker side is the upper slope. So these guys are uphill with those guys. Rocks, a little trail going up there. Scrub over here, and tree here. Okay, with the outer tree hexes and the inner tree hexes. Sand, or beach as they call it on this one, and water. If it's got sand and water in it, it's shallow. Beyond that, it's deep. Okay, so shallow water is adjacent with the water and the sand, and then you've got the beach. Deep water is pure blue. Now, a hex such as, say, this one here, which has got that little bit there, that is a shallow water hex. It's determined really by the center. That's a shallow water hex. Shallow water hex. Whereas this one, when there's a bit of water there, is a beach hex. Okay. And then obviously pure blue is deep water. Each of the characters generally has a movement value, denoted by what they're sort of wearing. So these are foot knights, they've got a movement of 6. These are foot light infantry, they've got a movement of 8. Cavalry generally have 12 if they're a knight and are armored, and unarmored cavalry are around about 15. Okay, so that's movement points. There's variable movement points going through these terrains, which I'll come to as and when we actually move those counters in there. Now there is a set sequence of play. You've got player A has so it's a you go and I go method, though there is interaction between the two players in various phases throughout the game. The scenario has 12 turns. there is no turn tracker that comes with the game or actually on this module. So I'm going to obviously have to keep track by using this notepad or some other method. Now the sequence, you've basically got player A goes through an offensive fire, cavalry charges, declaration, movement and defensive fire. So the defensive fire is done by the player B. Then combat, and then all stunned characters from the player B can stand up. Then it's player B, who then does the same things as player A. And then that's the end of a full game turn. So there is stacking allowed. Okay, though at the end of any turn, okay, there can only be one live character in a hex. So at the end of it, at the end of each movement phase, there must be no more than one living character on any hex. So a living character is a stunned character is still a living character. You can move through stunned guys, you can move through your own guys. You can't move through enemy unless they're, you can't move through standing enemy. So you can move through a stunned enemy. But at the end of the movement phase, there can only be one living character per hex. Okay, so hexes with tree symbols in it. Mounted characters can't go through hexes with the tree symbol or into interior buildings if we had buildings on this map, which we don't. Okay. Foot figures can go through the trees. Mounted characters can't go through deep water. Foot can, for as long as they're unarmored. Hex containing dead characters. If there's 3 dead people in a hex or 1 dead horse, okay, it costs 1 more additional movement point. And if it consists of 6 dead characters or 2 dead horses, the hex is actually blocked. These hexes can be cleared by other characters, but then they can't be doing anything else. And there are rules for carrying or removing dead figures, or how to carry, or carrying stunned characters as well. Now comes the most complex part of the rules. And I think this section of the rules has been tweaked with many times, and it's called infiltration. So infiltration is where a character, these are all classed as characters, okay, crosses a hex during his movement, which is adjacent to an enemy who is in a position to attack. So what does that actually mean? So if we move this guy, let's say here, we move him to here, and he stops, there's no infiltration there. But if he moved from here to here and then went to there, there is. And he would get an attack on him in that position there. And then any result from that attack, and it's not an actual attack on the attack tables, there's a special infiltration table, which will determine how effective this guy is compared to this guy. Okay, if this guy started, say, there, and then moved to there, there's no infiltration because he's not trying to move past him, he's moving away from there. But if he moves from there to there, then there is an infiltration attack. And this also occurs if a figure is forced to retreat. But I'll go through that in detail as and when we come to it. But there are effectively 9 pages of rules for the first section, 11 pages of rules on the first section to start playing the game. Okay, I'm going to do an accurate count now. From page 3 through to page 11 gets you playing the first 4 scenarios. So page 3 to page 11, so that is technically 7 pages. Of those 7 pages, 1 page is the terrain effects chart, 1 page is the sequence of play and what the counters stand for, and 1.5, nearly a whole page, is denoted to the infiltration rules. Then we've got rules about mounted characters and dismounting. Okay, it costs movement points to do that, and we'll go through that as and when we need to do that. We've got a whole page on missile fire. The only missiles involved in this one are javelins. So again, we'll go through it as and when we need to fire some javelins. And then we've got a page on terrain, and then about a page on physical hand-to-hand fighting, which again, we'll go through as and when we get to there. So that will be the rules that we'll go through at the present moment. I'm not going to sit here going through pages and pages of rules or reading them. As we play them, I've now gone through the counters. We're going to start the first turn, and that'll be the end of this particular video. And then I'll do a turn each way from there on. So the Germans start this scenario, which are these guys and these guys. And remember, the victory conditions is how many of these guys are left standing after 12 turns. So, well, I found a turn marker. Okay, went through the actual counters that are in the game, and there was a turn marker. So turn 1. In the sequence, you start off with offensive fire. Okay, so these guys here don't have any missile weapons. These cavalry don't have any missile weapons. These javelins do. But javelin's got a short range of 1 to 5 hexes. So that's effectively 2 to 10 meters. And a medium range of 6 to 12. And then a long range of 13 to 25. So they could do a few medium range shots, and javelins can't be used for defensive fire. They're only an offensive fire weapon. But in this sequence, we're not going to do any shooting as yet. Now, announcement of cavalry charges and counter charges. Now, this is an interesting little rule section because both sides have got cavalry here, and theoretically could initiate charges and counter charges, but they're not in the rule sections covered for this scenario. So even though there's lots of cavalry, there'll be no actual cavalry charges because those are covered in the next rule section. So I'm not too sure why they say you can play these scenarios without that particular section of rules, because that is in the, double check, combat tactics, which is in the charges and counter charges. So a little bit bizarre, because you can still do mounting, dismounting horses, leading horses, but the actual charge rules are in the next section. So there seems to be a restriction. Okay. The rider must travel at least 6 hexes. Okay, so they can cover 6 hexes in this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there could be, but I'm going to play it as is. That we haven't read the section on charges, so we won't have any. So must be too hot. Let's put a narrative reason why. You know, these horses are bushed and near exhaustion, so they can't actually charge. there are bonuses for charging and such. So, okay. Movement and defensive fire. Okay. So let's get these. Now these guys need to preserve. So is it wise to stay this close? Possibly not. Let's move back from the ridge. Now, this ridge does create a line of sight blockage as they step away. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, as you notice, each clear terrain hex costs 1, and the trees cost 2. So 2. Scrub is also 2 for foot. 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. 2, 4. 2, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Standing back from the ridge line. So standing here as a target, if you're away by more than 1 hex from the ridge, you can't be seen. So I think it goes into a little bit more detail about that in the actual line of sight rules. Okay. So let's move this infantry up. Now sand, or beach as they determine it, is 1. So that'd be 1, 2, 3. And then it's going to move up slope, which costs 2. Oops, right, one click. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Remember, you can move through your own guys. 7. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. I don't think we want to directly fight these guys yet, because these guys, you can see, have got, let's zoom in a little bit. 26, 24 attack values, but the defense is only 12. So let's see if we can get onto, pick on one guy there. So 1, 2. Now, they can move through any of the front 3 hexes. So you could then go there for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. Now, if that was a charge, he would counter charge. But again, we're not playing with those rules. Let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then we'll just move everybody else up. We're going to pick on this guy in our first combat. Oops. There we go. Right, so that's the end of the movement phase. No defensive fire and all that. Combats. All right, so we effectively have one combat. These 2 guys attacking him. The way the combat works, if this guy had been here, all three of these could have ganged up on him. He doesn't have to fight him directly. All three of these could attack him. So let's do that actually, why not? So you add up all their attack values. So 22 plus 24 plus 21, that's 67. And then you subtract his defense value, 14. That's 57, that's 53. And on the combat charts, I will actually bring up combat charts. Okay, you've got this here. You've got combat differential, which at the present moment is 51 to 70 is the difference between the two. All right. Then you look to see if there's any terrain modifiers. There is no terrain modifiers. So 51 to 70. However, there is one other modifier. There's more than one mounted attacker, shift the odds one column to the right. And then +1 to the die roll if the defender is armored. So he is armored because it's got his value encircled, but there's definitely more than one attacker. So it's in the 51 to 70 column, but then it shifted one to the 71 to 90 column, which is that one there. And then we roll a D10. Here's the D10 roll. It's a 6, +1 because his arm becomes a 7. In this column here with a 7, okay, that's an F. One rider wounded, so the defender is wounded. Okay, so we then decrease. And as you can see, his values drop. He's now wounded in his horse. And that's it. Wounded characters are not forced to retreat. Only if on here it says retreat, which mainly in mounted combat, you get all defenders retreat one out, one rider wounded. One attacker wounded is an A, all attackers retreat, one rider stunned and dismounted, all defenders retreat. So, okay. Why didn't say one defender, but there we go. So that's the combat charts. There are terrain effects when terrain applies. That's the end of the combat phase. There are no stunned characters from side B. So that would end the actual first player turn. Over to the Normans. Okay. Offensive fire. Right. Well, these guys can now no longer see these guys. These are the only guys with missile fire capability, and they can't see these guys. So, no offensive fire. We then have the announcement of cavalry charges and counter charges. Again, we're not playing with those rules. Movement and defensive fire. Javelins cannot be used defensively. It says offensive fire only on the actual missile chart. Let me bring that up again. Okay. So this section here, this here has the foot javelin with its ranges. This is offensive only. Limits on movement. You've got no limit on movement. What that actually means is sometimes if you've got a bow, you can't move if you use offensive fire, and you're limited by how much you can move in the defensive fire phase as well if you fire the bow. Okay. And there's obviously charts and tables for missile fire, which we'll go through as and when we actually do that. And these are the terrain effects charts. Okay. So movement. Well, though these guys aren't as good as these guys in a fisticuff fight, they need to get up that hill to engage them. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1. Actually, go back. The rocks cost 4 for foot movement, so no. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. Now the rocks are impassable for horses. So there's a trail up here. I want to get some of these mounted guys over to this side here. Because at the end of the day, the Normans want to engage these and kill these guys and fight off these guys. So we've got 3 mounted figures here, try and get up into this area. So, and it costs movement to get round and such forth. Let's move them. Right. So 1, and now if I want to change his facing, so rotate clockwise, Control R. That costs 1 as well. Well, effectively, it goes into there. So if it's a facing change, and remember it says 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Remember I can move into 8. Now to move down, well, it just says moving on the slope. It doesn't say up or down. So these are 8 there. But you only pay the movement cost of the front 8. Let's. He wants to move in there. Change facing. 9, 10. Okay, plus 1 to change the facing. Get the rules. Yeah, 1 to change. You know, a nice little diagram. Okay, that's just 1 to do that. Any more than that, so okay, let's start him here. So he went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's 8, and then 4 to start going down the slope. 9, 10, 11, 12 to there. All right. For some reason, Robert, who's a knight, was on his wrong side there. Okay. 1, 2, plus 4, 6. 7. You only pay for the front of the horse. 8, 9. Wrong way. 10. Let's see what happens when we have a knight involved. 10. Wrong way again. 11. And then Robert. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 12. Okay. And then we're going to engage this infantryman. Now, horses can not walk backwards in this. So we can turn this guy. Right. Remember, that's his 3 front. I want him to go into there. So I can turn the counter completely round. That will cost 5 movement points. And that could turn around completely around. So, for example, I could go, let's see, remembering how to do it. So if we just turn him like that, that costs 5 movement points. And to do that will cost 6 for the 1 hex. Okay. Why want to go backwards? There we go. Okay. Then remembering he was like that, I just want his facing to go there. So that will be to that. That will actually cost 2 movement points. And we'll have this guy do the same. It's the wrong way. That's 2 movement points. 3 movement points are there. All right. So this guy, so he can't just physically do that. What he can do is turn around completely for 5, and move in there for 6, and then turn around completely again. Yeah, there's no attack back, as it were, as he's backing away. But if he'd moved from side to side, there would have been. So these guys are just doing that, effectively turning the horse around, move back 1 hex, turn around, back around again. Trying to delay these guys, going to engage these guys. All right, so combat-wise, we're going to have this mounted guy attack this foot. So it's 24 to 10. So bringing up the Guiscard charts. I can't shrink these down, but it's fighting combat against infantry. So it's 25 to 10. So it's in this column. The differential is 15. All right. The next thing we look at on there is he armored. He is armored. So it's still 25 to 10. He's on no terrain modifier. So and it's just 1 guy attacking. So it's still that column there with a +1 because he's armored. If we move this out of the way, 9 becomes a 10. Oh, that's a bit of a disaster. So this column here, 10, is a B. B. 1 attacker retreats, 1 hex. Not quite sure what that symbol there means. But 1 attacker retreats, 1 hex. And this is where your horse, it's 1 hex. So you'll push him back to there. So the horse does move back in that circumstances, but in our view that he's whizzed him around and he's whizzed back around again. Okay. These two attacking this foot guy. 26 plus 24 is 50 against 8. 42 differential. there's 2 to 1, guys. So it's in this column becomes this column due to the 2 guys, and there's no armor involved. His defense value is not, oh, sorry, actually it's not 8, is it? It's 6. So 50 take away 6 is 42. Same column, but up 1 because he's on his own. Roll the dice. Bad as you can get. Norman's not having much luck. That's a C. All defenders retreat 1 hex. There's only 1 defender. So now he's got to retreat away from the attack. So he can retreat either into here or here. If he retreats into here, he can either displace the guy or he can go retreat beyond him. Let's retreat him beyond. These guys can advance if they want to, but they will decline to do so. And that is the end of the first turn. So I'm going to now mark this. We're going to start turn 2. And I'll end the log file there. End log file. And file, save game. Okay. Just keep it all in there. There we go. There's a bit of hassle for you. So yes, so we've had a little bit of combat, a bit of movement, just showing you what the game actually looks like. As per always, if you like the video, please hit the like button. If you like quite a few of my videos, hit the subscribe button. And any comments, as always, we much appreciate it. Until next time, all the best. Bye.